Hello everyone. Thank you for coming to the WithSecure Cybersecurity Innovation stage. I'm going to be presenting to you about tales from the field, blind spots in corporate security, and also what to do about them. Let me use this handheld mic instead. So, nice to meet you everyone. My name is Antti Tuomi. I'm originally from Finland, hence the weird name, but now I've been based in Japan for 7 years now. And every time I introduce myself to my wife's family in the Philippines, I go like, "Hi, nice to meet you, I'm Antti," and they go like, "Nice to meet you, Antti, I'm uncle." So, easy to remember name. Anyway, I'm working as a principal security consultant at WithSecure Japan. So we are a cybersecurity consulting company that's a global company. We got roughly 200 security consultants over the world. We're headquartered in Finland, but we've got offices in the US, Europe, Japan, Singapore. We work with a lot of clients like globally and in APAC. But in any case, I'm not here to talk about business. So if you're interested in us, come chat to me at the coffee area. Let's get into the topic. My final point there, I'm finally at peace with being a generalist instead of a super hacker. So a lot of experience, jack of all trades, master of none. But you need those people in the business as well. In any case, during this session, I'll be talking to you about a couple of case studies from our experiences with our clients and how they maybe, unintentionally maybe missed something in how they are running their security operations and how should we be dealing with that. And of course, during the session, I would like you all to also think about like, okay, could this happen to us or is there something that we could learn from this? So, I have 4 case studies for you. First one is about a checkbox in the CRM platform. We've got Active Directory Takeover type of thing. One called Trust but Verify, and then when compliance catches up to your security operations. Without further ado, since we only have very limited time, I'm trying to not speak too fast, so let's get right into it. So the case study number 1 is how a new checkbox in a CRM platform led to a data breach. And here when I say a data breach, I would have to say like hundreds or thousands of data breaches globally. But this is how the case looked to us from our perspective. So this was during my time in Japan, or like still in Japan, but one of our Japanese clients who was a large client in the financial industry. And they contacted us saying that, well, actually we just found out that we incurred a security incident through the Salesforce CRM platform that we're using for all customer operations. And what basically happened is that they realized that someone had been able to dump a lot of customer information through this public-facing Salesforce Experience Cloud site. So basically a website that's hosted on the Salesforce platform. And the incident had already been resolved, but the client's question was like, okay, how do we make sure that the rest of our group companies are also secure? How do we make sure that this never happens again? So we started investigating, okay, what was this whole thing about? And the exploit behind this whole thing is that there was an article by a researcher called Aaron Costello. It's called Salesforce Lightning, an in-depth look at exploitation vectors for the everyday community. Over here, you have the link enumerated.ie/Salesforce. And basically this article describes a way to use the Salesforce platform feature called Aura APIs. So it's this APIs through which, when you visit a Salesforce site, they get the page data, and it's a usual REST API. So in practice, you just post a request in the right format and you're able to query for data. However, the issue that led to this data breach actually had a couple of different reasons behind it. So first of all, for this particular client and many of our clients, what happened that all of these custom website features were behind a login page, as you would expect, right? Except now with this new feature called Lightning Experience for guest users, what happened was that these Aura JSON APIs were available to guests as well. So this was in order to make also sites with guest users, more interactive and so on. That was a new feature. And if you never, bother to actually go look at these like data access settings, there's a category called default external access. Well, why would you need to disable those? We don't have any guest users, we're behind login. Until then, Aaron Costello's blog post highlighted that you could actually start a session for any Salesforce site and then use that session identifier to call the APIs on your target site. So now you're in this weird limbo mode where your session is kind of not a guest but not a logged in user, and there's no restrictions to what data you can access, and the JSONs are now available to the API is now available to the guest users as well. So basically, you would be able to query almost all of the data in many of the organizations. So who would win? You could hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on thread-led red teaming, phishing awareness campaigns, and EPPDR solutions, or one new checkbox deploy in the CRM configuration. So anyway, long story short, we and many of our clients found that there had been a lot of these exploitation attempts, and you did need to have all these three conditions to come true for you to be able to exploit this. However, this was kind of a big thing, and especially when it comes to the Salesforce platform, it's kind of considered a software as a service and a CRM platform, and I think it kind of bypasses the security team, the IT security team's scrutiny. So actually, most of our clients had not actually looked at, how do we configure Salesforce securely? Is there actually some attack vectors other than usual web applications and login towards the platform? So that was one of the big lessons learned, and that has led to me doing a load of Salesforce security assessment projects in the last 3-4 years. Also, one of the things that's very common in these cloud-based platforms is that there's new features coming out all the time. This applies, of course, to Salesforce, AWS, Amazon, Google Cloud Platform, and so on. And staying top of those new features is very important, but it also takes a lot of time to do so. So that's why we also have a dedicated expert teams for each of the cloud platforms to be able to who are actually looking at every single update and every single feature that comes out to be able to advise our clients. And the fact is that unless you have a dedicated team, it's very hard to actually stay on top of both the features themselves and the security requirements and how to configure things. So that's definitely a challenge both for us and for all of our clients as well. Also, these point-in-time checks are not often enough in the long term. So even if you looked at the Salesforce configurations once, and now this new feature, Lightning Experience for guest users, comes out, and suddenly you might be vulnerable again. So you need to have a continuous process for that. Anyway, to the next case. So this one is called Active Directory Takeover in a security-aware bank. And the background here is that we work with basically a modern, very cloud-native bank. They're very technically oriented, very smart young people who basically sent out to build the whole platform on Azure, kind of almost from the ground up. So they have next to no on-premise things. It's basically one of the the modern almost online-only banks. And they sent out an RFP for they do have obviously office environments and internal networks and so on. So they needed to do a yearly security assessment of the internal network. And this was our first time participating in this RFP for the internal network security testing. And well, the results of that were basically, this is one of the attack flow diagrams of what happened. So we started from the point of view of possibly an infected workstation or workstation in the internal network, and basically validated all of these different attack paths from Kerberoastable domain admin accounts, credential exposed and sysvol, and all of those, and basically got several confirmed routes to take over the whole Active Directory domain and the Entra ID domain. And kind of how did it get here? We had this, a very security-oriented bank that had been doing internal pen tests for several years. And in this case, from my point of view, one of the issues was that they had been doing this internal pen test for, 4 or 5 years. And the RFP was kind of, I would say, stuck in the same as last year mode. So we need to do an internal pen test again. So let's send out an RFP for an internal pen test. And then, they worked with different companies in their area, and kind of did the same thing over and over, and fixed all the findings, and then everything was supposed to be fine. And then suddenly, it was our first time participating in this, so we went and okay, have we actually looked at taking over the AD and so on? And kind of a fresh approach to things. And yeah, that took them by surprise. The interesting part here was that at the end of the results presentation with the higher ups, they were asking like, so how do our results compare to other banks? And we were like, I was saying, well, I did not know that they had done this before. So I told them that, well, this is usually what we see on the first time when you do like an internal pen test. So don't worry, it gets better from here. It's a very common result for the first time. And later on, they told me like, actually, Antti, they've been doing this for 4 or 5 years with different vendors from, until now. So I was like, oh, oops, sorry. In any case, a lesson learned for them, and definitely highlighted to them that it's very easy to fall into this complacency when you have a long-lived environment or system where you go like, okay, let's do the same test again, we need to do the same test again. And that really kind of, stifles the, actually looking into what's important and is there something else that we might be missing. So one of these, basically a blind spots you might run into. My suggestions on how to prevent this is, first of all, avoid the same as last time type of RFPs and security testing scopes. So hopefully you would do kind of, I would say maybe threat modeling before submitting the RFP. Or at least include the threat modeling and defining the scope based on the current situation, not just what we did last year and the year before that and so on. Also, one thing that we have also noticed with many of our clients, especially for example in the banking industry, you have environments that have been there for tens of years. And if you have the same testing staff, even in our team internally, you kind of start losing the new perspective because you're too familiar with the environment. So we try to internally rotate the staff as well. And I think that makes sense from our client's perspective as well. You could rotate companies, you could basically make sure that even internally and with the vendors you work with, you do have a bit of a fresh view every time. And another thing is this kind of, if you think that something is kind of out of scope, yeah, our team is submitting the RFP, but the Active Directory is not our responsibility, then you end up in a situation where you might be overlooking something that's actually very important, totally. And then if the other team also does not actually submit, a security testing for the AD part, then suddenly you have a blind spot. It's kind of, on the badminton court and ball falls in between both of your players on your side of the court. And definitely here as well, one of the small things is also defense in depth. The more you apply that, the harder it is to actually end up in a situation where you have all of these different routes to the main target and are able to kind of cover at least a bit of the ground that you might have otherwise missed. Okay. On to the third case. I'm calling this trust but verify. And this is an interesting case from one of our clients in the aviation industry. So I've been working with a lot of airlines globally, and in the aviation industry, especially since you're dealing with transporting people and their lives and so on, the customer's trust is paramount. So in the industry, basically doing threat and risk assessments and certifying the planes and software for airworthiness is kind of the baseline. They operate on trust. So we worked with a specific airline that was basically wanting to ask okay, we're introducing in-flight connectivity, in-flight entertainment to our fleet. What kinds of risks does that pose? And of course, we recommended that okay, even if all the systems are provided by a vendor, or a supplier of the connectivity and so on, it still makes sense to do a independent review. And yes, the airline agreed. Of course, we cooperate with the vendors as much as we can, but in any case, we trust their judgment, but let's verify just in case it helps us all out. So being on board the plane in the hangar at night, it's hot, people are cleaning stuff around you. It's not very nice, but it's very intriguing. So we were looking at basically this one of the servers. There's usually only one on the only one or two on the airplane because weight is the main priority when it comes to flying. So we're looking at it and going okay, looks nice. At least there's no IPv6 address configured, so that's a good starting point. And my colleague from Poland goes wait, I think there's a way. And he remembered that in IPv6, even if there's no address configured, you can actually calculate the address of that particular network interface from the MAC address of the interface. And suddenly, even if there's no address configured, we can actually connect to it. And one thing that often happens in servers is like even if you configure firewalls, you need to configure them separately for IPv4 and IPv6. And in this case, of course, because there was no address configured, there was no firewall rules configured for IPv6 either. I mean, yeah. So that was a very interesting case, and a lot of like lessons learned to like both us and the airline and the vendor as well, and making sure like we were really happy, like all the parties were really happy that we actually did this verification, because behind the network interface, what we would have seen is all the cabin control systems and everything. So very, very awkward if someone would have been able to access that. So yes, basically trust but verify. Try performing third-party unbiased assessments where necessary. It's of course up to your risk assessment, but sometimes it makes a lot of sense. And in general, I think in this case, if we just did a fully black box testing and had no idea about what's behind the network interface, we might not have found this issue. So in this case, it's just the cooperation between us and the systems vendor and the airline really made things happen. So general, way better results overall. And especially when it comes to these complex environments, for example, in the aviation systems, it's very easy to accidentally overlook something. And in this case, it was the IPv6 thing, so the devil is in the details. Okay, on to the last case. And this is when compliance catches up to your security operations. And this is a case study that was told to me by one of our principal security consultants over here at the Singapore office. And if I remember correctly, in 2018 or so, the Cybersecurity Act was introduced in Singapore that requires you to do internal pen testing for basically all systems that contain critical information or that is classified as critical information infrastructure. And this requirement basically came up reasonably suddenly, and a lot of companies had not done a lot of proactive security testing before this. Trying to be compliant with the rules so far. Okay, we need to be compliant with this one as well. So let's do a security assessment. And what happened in a lot of cases was that there were loads and loads of vulnerabilities. I remember hearing stories about being able to log into all the the money transfer systems, basically unrestricted access to a lot of like financial systems and so on. So basically, if you only follow the compliance rules and kind of do the bare minimum, then you might end up in a situation where you have actually not done enough until now, and you're now scrambling to mitigate the issues in order to remain compliant. So that was a tough time for many of our clients, but our consulting team in Singapore had a fun time popping shells left and right. So they had a good time from that point of view. Anyway, that was the fourth tale, and the lessons learned here is indeed the compliance sets the minimum requirement. But as you know, like standards are kind of one size fits none, so it's kind of the minimum bar that you need to fill. But what are the risks related to actually your business and your systems in particular? You need to also think about that. There's also a lot of technologies and systems where the standards are not yet mature enough that, for example, when it comes to, let's say, generative AI, how many security standards are there that you can comply with to be secure, right? So you need to be proactive about this. Also, perform threat and risk analysis to identify what matters to you in specific. Instead of just looking at compliance, this is what everyone has to do, but what is it that we have to do? Also, what's interesting is to observe other regions to plan ahead. There's a lot of, for example, in Europe currently there's a Cyber Resilience Act being planned for devices that are going to be sold in Europe that you need to comply with in the future. And for example, whereas in Singapore you already have the requirement to perform red teaming for financial organizations, that requirement is only now coming up in Japan. So looking a bit at what are the other countries, what are the other regions doing, you can get a bit of a head start or jump start into knowing what would make sense to you as well. Anyway, we're almost running out of time, so let's go to the conclusions and takeaways. So the main things that I would like to highlight here is, first of all, that security is difficult for everyone. We're dealing with the art of exceptions to the rule. So we need to, as security consulting companies, we need to stay on top of the trends, but so do our clients. It's difficult, you need to take your time. And many of the blind spots that we've seen, first of all, third-party services that might avoid the scrutiny, you might get complacent, you might not have enough cooperation and collaboration between your teams internally or with the vendors, not being able to keep up with the changes in technologies, or just operating on compliance instead of informed security decisions. So suggestions. Start with the threat and risk analysis. Figure out what's important to your business and operate based on that. Remember to take into account all the external dependencies, vendor control technical levels, and trust but verify, encourage fresh perspective, and use defense in depth. It is essential. Thank you very much. That's all. We only have 5 seconds left for questions, but if we have one, I think we might be able to get one. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you everyone for your time. Very happy for you to have come here. If you have questions later on, I will be at the coffee area around here, so please hit me up. Thank you very much.